So, Berto, I thought that what we would talk about today is I asked ChatGPT to give a bunch of movies based on criteria, and we would evaluate if ChatGPT and the large language model that it's pulling from is accurate or not. What do you say?
Okay. That sounds very fascinating. I'm in.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor, and I only introduce this podcast when Berto is here. Who are you, Berto?
My name is Humberto and I advocate for nitrogen.
So I asked ChatGPT to list the top 20 movies about psychology. So let's evaluate this list. At the top of your head, do you have any contenders that you think should be on the list?
Yeah, Good Will Hunting and
that's on the list.
Yeah, and then it starts with an I.
Inception?
No. I think it's Insomnia.
Oh, Insomnia. Yeah. Okay.
And
it was a Swedish movie, I believe, and then they redid it in the States.
Right. And then, what about Bob?
Yeah, geez. Okay, so let's go over the list here. The first one is A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe plays John Nash, directed by Ron Howard. Sure. It is explicitly about schizophrenia.
Right.
The real person, John Nash, reportedly was diagnosed and suffered from schizophrenia. I looked at all my IMDb ratings on these movies, and I gave A Beautiful Mind a 7 out of 10.
I remember liking it.
Yeah. It's a interesting movie.
It has the... What's her name, right? From Requiem for a Dream?
Yeah.
Jennifer
Connelly. Yeah. And is it accurate? What I would say is that it is as a summary, but it simplifies the disorder and compresses time, compresses treatment. It kind of makes it seem like everything's fine in the end, and when in all likelihood it wasn't like all fine, but it could have been. I don't know.
Well, and it also made it look like all the government stuff wasn't real, even though all the conspiracies were real.
Yeah. And it also connects, once again, as Hollywood always does, schizophrenia or mental illness with genius.
Right.
So there's that. But it's not an explicit part of the plot. It's, if you're going to make a movie about mental illness, I suppose choosing someone from history who has an interesting story that was at least kind of famous in their world, I guess, is valid. Next movie on the list, Good Will Hunting, 1997.
So many good quotes. And that movie really had no business being that good, right? It was like their first outing writing a movie. The two of them are acting in the movie they wrote. That's kind of already a little sus, and then... but they scored big with what's his name? Robin.
Gus Van Sant. Oh, and Ron Williams.
Yeah, but even that, it's like...
But even Ron Williams, like...
Had we seen him in, I guess,
He had been, but he certainly wasn't known for...
Was he in Awakenings? No.
Yeah, by that point. But that role...
But I wouldn't have thought of him, right? It was just like, the comedian.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, he, obviously blew... Oh, I guess he had been Dead Poets Society.
But still
a wacky
Good Will
role,
Hunting...
A bit wacky,
It's a very intense and specific sort of character.
Totally.
That he just completely nails.
There was no wackiness in that character. No wackiness.
I know therapists like him that have the same vibe as him, that operate, aside from the trying to strangle Matt Damon's character when he pissed him off.
You don't do that as part of your practice?
Yeah. The rest of it is pretty accurate. Now, might a therapist lose their cool with a guy like Matt Damon and get violent with him? Yeah, it happens, but it's pretty rare.
Well, but I also say the thing that was impressive to me is because even in Dead Poets Society, you could see the Robin Williams kind of seeping through a bit in the parts that makes him fun, right? Like kind of the wacky and unpredictable stuff. Not in this movie.
Yeah.
This was like, whoa, wait, so you're a different character? Like you have a different character in you? That's interesting.
Yeah. It is about not a disorder of any sort. So it's not trying to be accurate regarding an actual disorder. It's about trauma from childhood sexual abuse and how, for one person, Matt Damon's character, it can cause them to be angry and dismissive, avoidant of vulnerability. You know, there's a big moment with the Minnie Driver character, and also it is preventing him from wanting to stretch his wings academically within the math community. Right. And so the therapist helps him to recover from the trauma. One of my best scenes, even, you know, not even that I'm a therapist, when he is like, it's not your fault.
It's not your
It's not your fault. Like the acting, the writing, the directing, the pacing, the build up to that scene, right? Because everything informs that scene.
Yeah.
And
the danger of that moment, because you're not sure as the viewer, like, what's going to happen? Because he's liable to punch him or storm out. He'll never see him again. Like, what's...
Yeah. And so accurate to therapy, because I often say this to my trainees, that you can have the best intervention or question or statement or thing that you do as a therapist in the world. 99.9% of the time, the first time you go into it with a client, it doesn't land. But you have to keep at it. Sometimes you just keep asking the same question. But other times you come at it from other angles, or you come at it over multiple sessions or something. But it shows that progression in a very believable way. And you could totally see a therapist doing that sort of thing.
I remember when I was watching the movie the very first time, I was in the theater enjoying it. But there was a moment in the movie where I realized that this was not trivial writing. And I wasn't even a great, like, you know, my movie taste and movie understandings has developed way much. I mean, that movie is old now, right? But even then, I could appreciate, like, whoa, that's an interesting thing. And it was the scene when they're in the park, and the previous scene, they had a bad exchange, and Robin Williams, I think that's when he tried to choke him or whatever.
Is this when they're on the bench?
Yeah, they're on the bench at the park, and I'm thinking, well, this is the moment in the movie where they're going to say something, and I'm going to have to be okay with the fact that realistically it wouldn't really have gotten Matt Damon's character over the hump. But you know, I'm loving the movie, so I'm going to go along with it. But they found an angle that I thought was believable, that he hadn't had experiences. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and I'm sure it was predicted at the moment that, like, Matt Damon and what's his face?
Ben Affleck.
Ben Affleck were going to be the next auteurs, like the next Woody Allens or the next Scorsese or something, and they never wrote another movie that was even close to that.
Yeah, I mean, they were really more actors than they were writers, but that first thing was amazing.
Yeah. And
the music?
Yeah, right. Yeah, the wall-to-wall Elliott Smith. And you just think, well, I wonder if they hadn't been successful actors, if they would have been actually successful writers, because acting, I'm guessing, is easier than writing.
Now, did Ben Affleck write Argo?
He directed it.
He directed?
Yeah. Plus, even if he did write it, that's not a masterpiece in my book.
Yeah.
But
anyways,
so,
interesting.
Yeah, so in terms of the psychology, it is a typical Hollywood trope that all you need, and this is a theme with a lot of these movies, is one big emotional moment where it all comes pouring out and you cry and you're cured. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
You know, for some people, if they have a discrete grief, like say everything's fine in your life and you have a cat that dies and you're, for whatever reason, denied the opportunity to have emotion about it and grieve. And a couple years later, but I can't imagine if that's all your problem is. I can't imagine there being any symptoms, you know?
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's like your partner wants to get another cat and you're just like...
And you're fighting all the time about it or something.
You're just a real jerk about it, I suppose. But even that's kind of a stretch.
Mostly you're writing a scene in a show rather than a real...
Right. But it's... so it's like with a lot of these movies, I appreciate them for raising awareness. Because, you know, most movies, you know, like Mission Impossible or Dude, Where's My Car? It's like there's no message or meaning or deeper educational value or anything. So
where to put your keys is important.
Yeah. So I appreciate that, but then they have to shoehorn in the 5-act narrative. So there's a climax and
Right.
then riding off in the sunset. There are movies where they don't do that, where at the end, although there was a climax that was emotional, the message isn't, and everything's fine. But so many movies are like this. Like a movie that's not on this list is Silver Linings Playbook,
Right.
which was that way. Now, you could argue that the movie isn't explicitly saying that.
Sure.
But you have...
It's still a great movie, but yeah.
Yeah, but you have two characters. One has a pretty good case of bipolar. Mm-hmm. The other, a pretty good case of borderline, and maybe, also depression, depending. And they portrayed that pretty well. Like the scene in which they show Bradley Cooper having a manic episode is pretty close. That's rare that they will show actual mania, and it was within the bounds. Like typically with mental illness, it'll be like the person's crazy and they're like climbing off the walls, or they're murderous, or they have that Stanley Kubrick eyes, they're just kind of looking through their eyebrows, or just like, I am going to kill you. And,
honey, I'm home.
Yeah, that kind of shit. And with Bradley Cooper, he's running around, he's energetic, he has a lot of motivation, he is going through stuff, and he has all these ideas, and he is having a hard time getting people on board with what he's saying, fair amount of conflict, he's sort of spinning out of control. With J-Law's character, from my memory, I do remember them actually portraying borderline moments, like where she would get triggered and you would see her kind of turn and be pretty hostile, from my memory. But the climax is they do this dance routine, right? And they kill it at the end, they do really great. And they're in love, and then the movie ends.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you have a couple where one person suffers from bipolar and is at the very beginning of their treatment exploration.
Right.
You have another person with fucking borderline personality disorder. That does not ever go away, really. I mean, you can recover and manage and not have the symptoms.
It seems like that would be the end of the first episode of a long series.
Yeah. It's and it wasn't even an emotional discovery. It was a dance that they accomplished. If anything, it would make it worse. He could become more manic about dancing. She could become more dependent on succeeding.
Whereas I don't know if I think you were getting at, like in Good Will Hunting, the ending is so atypical. Like, first of all, he's not like cured. He's just sort of gotten over a part of a hump about, okay, maybe I should open up.
Well, you remember clearer than I do, because he gets with Minnie Driver, right?
Well, no, he drives off to go find her.
Right. But you could see how
across the country.
You could see how someone would read into that and say, his life's going to be fine now.
I don't know, man, because, like, first of all, he gave up all the mathematical opportunities because he decided that the thing that mattered was try to repair his relationship. Mm-hmm. But he still has issues, and he doesn't have a job. I just love that the movie ends with the unknown. Like, he's just driving off.
Right.
Elliott Smith plays us out.
if his trauma was pretty low grade, which it didn't seem, then maybe he's doing okay. But whatever he was suffering, and I guess you could argue that he wasn't even really suffering that much, right? He was jaded, and well, even with relationship.
I mean, he was getting in fights, getting arrested. Like he was.
Yeah. But context,
Yeah.
a lot of his friends were doing that. So I guess the question is the audience, how many in the audience were led to believe that when he meets up with Minnie Driver, that his relational traumas, his abusive history has been cured?
Yeah, a lot of them might say, yeah, he's fine. They're fine. They're happily ever after.
Yeah. Not accurate.
Yeah.
So it's just that kind of thing, And I guess it's hard to do that, because how are you supposed to end a movie where, unless it's a horror movie or like a depressing ending, like Pi, which we'll get into later, it's like, how do you have an ending to a movie that both has resolution? Because, storytelling, you got to have some kind of resolution.
Right.
And yet respects human reality.
Well, but and that is what I think is so great about it, is that the thing that Robin Williams was hired to do was to get Matt Damon's character to apply himself mathematically.
Right.
And technically, he failed.
Yeah. But he himself would say,
well, I was trying to help him as a person.
yeah.
And technically, there was some amount of success. But we don't know what the next step is, because leading up to this, he again failed with a relationship, right?
Yeah.
So I think that,
But
as far as you can, it is still giving you a resolution, but still pretty like open-ended.
Well, I'm glad you remember the details
Yeah.
better. And it's been a while since. So I will give it absolute credit.
Yeah.
Especially two young, with all due respect, douchebags of Matt Damon and I keep forgetting their fucker's name. What's his name? Ben Affleck.
Batfleck.
That these two guys write an ending and manage to get Harvey Weinstein to sign off on this.
Yeah.
That not only does he not become a mathematical genius that wins the Nobel Prize, not only and also he doesn't really get the girl.
There's no kissing scene at the end.
He's just he's free and now
He's driving cross country and maybe will rekindle the situation.
I mean, I guess you could say he succeeded by breaking free of his working class shackles, because that's Ben Affleck's whole thing. It's just like, dude, you're not made for us, me, and the rest of the guys. Like, this is our life. This is not your life. The next movie is Shutter Island. 2010. I gave it 8 out of 10. By the way, I gave Good Will Hunting 9 out of 10. I feel like maybe I should give it 10 out of 10, honestly. Shutter Island, I gave 8 out of 10. I really like Shutter Island. A lot of people didn't.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think because it is not a typical Scorsese movie.
Not, no. I was not expecting it at all. I actually didn't have an interest in seeing it. I don't even think at the time I was aware that it was a Scorsese movie. I just knew that. My opinion of Matt Damon, what's his name? Leonardo.
Leo.
Yeah, my opinion of him used to be low.
By the way, I watched snippets of
what's he doing?
Oh God, what's the movie where he's in the snow and
Revenant.
Revenant. I watched like a bunch of scenes from Revenant last night.
Oh,
I forgot how brutally good that movie is.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But at the time, all I really knew Leonardo from was Titanic. And although
when you saw Shutter Island,
before Shutter Island, all I really knew Leonardo from was like Titanic.
Really?
Yeah, because I had never seen. Wasn't he in What's Eating Gilbert Grape? And
yeah,
I had never seen that.
He was also in
Basketball Diaries. I don't think I had seen that yet.
He was also in a movie with De Niro about, it's an adaptation of a memoir that takes place near Seattle, Concrete.
And I had not seen that.
That is so interesting. Did you not watch a lot of movies back then?
No, I did. I think I literally feel like I had a thing against Leonardo DiCaprio because I associated
Gangs in New York? Are you sure you're
Wait,
remembering?
what year was Shutter Island?
Shutter Island is 2010.
Oh.
Revolutionary Road.
No, but when was Revolutionary?
All these are before Shutter Island.
Oh, really? No.
Blood Diamond.
I take it back.
The Departed, Aviator, Catch Me If You Can.
All right, I take it back.
Celebrity.
Never mind.
Yeah, I'm like, I was like, this does not make sense to me.
Never mind. Okay, so this is
at the very least, his performance surprised you.
Oh, what might have been is maybe I never saw. Wait, no, that doesn't make sense either. Never mind.
This is only 14 years ago.
No, 100% I'm wrong. I must be thinking of a different thing way before that because there was a time when Titanic was all I knew Leonardo from.
Yeah,
and I didn't like him because I thought, oh, he's that guy from Titanic. But clearly, I'm way off on the timeline. Either way, when I saw Shutter Island, I wasn't intending to see it. Maybe because the previews I didn't know what it was about or whatever. And then once I watched it, I was blown away. Really enjoyed it. So, long story short, cool story, bro.
I'm thinking maybe Gangs of New York or Aviator.
No, I already liked him by then. I'm just crazy. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, I don't know, because you got Titanic. You got Man in the Iron Mask, which he's kind of barely in, essentially.
I did see that. I didn't love that movie. It was bad.
I watched some summaries of that movie, and I feel like I saw that. But he's in Celebrity, which
Did not see that.
I remember not enjoying it that much. It's a Woody Allen movie, but it's kind of a weird Woody Allen movie. He was in The Beach.
I see. That's one of the ones I didn't watch because I didn't want to see a movie with Leonardo DiCaprio. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of, actually. Now that I think about it, wasn't The Beach actually supposed to be a good movie?
I think everyone figured it was sort of like, well, it's Danny Boyle, which
I think people liked The Beach.
Yeah, I don't remember.
But at the time when that came out, all I remember is in the preview, Leonardo was doing like punches in the air like this, wearing a little bandana thing. And I'm like, no, thank you. I don't want to see that guy from Titanic.
Yeah. The way it was marketed, I think they were really trying to play up the Leonardo DiCaprio, because you could argue it was the first Leo-centric movie after Titanic, so you could imagine that they would really be pushing an angle.
That's what I was thinking of. I got completely
the heart-throbness of him instead of... because if it's Danny Boyle, it's not going to be this cheesy... No. But maybe it is a bad movie. Anyway. But
then after that, when I started watching movies with him, it changed my opinion. So you're absolutely correct. It was not... I was not right about that.
And by the way, if you're still listening to this, and, you know, because some people listen to the podcast and they're not into movies like the way you and I are, or they don't watch the same stuff that we do. In a bit after the break-ish, we're going to get into talking about representation, you know, Hispanic representation in movies, and Asian representation, and women representation, and getting into that stuff. So it'll be more movie talk. But
sit tight. 6 hours later.
Yeah. The thing that I thought before scheduling this pod session with Berto was we just spent some very grueling hours researching and recording and me editing hours and hours of content about neo-Nazis, and I just wanted to talk about something that was easier to talk about.
Yes.
But so Shutter Island, schizophrenia, is it accurate? Yeah, but people are usually much more disorganized and confused than he was. I mean, you could argue he was confused in a sense, but typically if you're fully delusional the way that he was supposedly, then it would be hard to imagine that he would be able to hold together long enough. Because, you know, as we're watching the first beginning of the movie, no one, the audience, we don't think of him not as a police investigator.
Right. No, I don't know if they had tipped their hand or...
They do. It's weird, man.
Nothing.
I've rewatched it. I didn't either. Yeah. But I've rewatched it recently. And when you know...
Okay, is it like The Sixth Sense, where like the second time you watch it, you're like, wait a minute, how did I not see this?
It's riddled. Yeah,
really.
Yeah, but the thing is it's so well done that why would you think that? Yeah. You know what I mean? So that is inaccurate. But if you believe that he's defensively delusional, meaning he's not actually schizophrenic. Meaning that
like they fed him some drugs or something.
No. That like denial. You know? Because some people can go that far, but that's not typical. You know, the fact that it was that split off in his mind that he could operate consciously as if he was a police officer investigating and not an actual patient. Spoiler alert. And of course, it connects mental illness and conditions with scary horror shit, you know, and murder, which is another Hollywood trope, which is not.
Speaking of spoiler alerts, the other day, so I've been watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Really?
With my 13-year-old.
Okay.
And I had never watched.
This?
Well, actually, her mom, my wife, had suggested that maybe she'd be interested in it.
Was she into it?
No, we never watched it.
That's weird.
Neither of us had ever watched it. I had watched the movie, the stupid, dumb movie that came out that I actually loved at the time. And we actually said, hey, listen, we should start with the movie first. We watched the movie, or we tried to watch the movie, and within 20 minutes, we were all like, this is really bad, and said, let's just start the series. The series is actually really fun. Did you ever watch the series?
No. it was at a time when
Yeah.
I didn't have
Yeah,
TV or cable.
And
or,
I think at the time, I don't know. I just never watched it. Thoroughly enjoying it. But so I was talking to someone and I'm like, yeah, we're on season 3 and stuff. And we're very excited. And
no.
And the person, having just heard what season we're on, says something, which I'm not going to say because I don't even want to acknowledge it mentally, says something that's a clear spoiler. And then I'm just like,
What'd they do?
they were like, oh, sorry. Oh, you probably haven't gone. I'm like,
So there is a whole psychology about okay. So let's assume that this person has enough neuronal capacity
yeah,
to know that to say such a thing would spoil it.
right.
So what is the psychology that is behind it? Because this happens a lot.
Yeah.
Now, spoilers like me just spoiling Shutter Island, it's a different thing because it's like, one, it's a 14-year-old movie. Two, I don't know.
Well, you're also not having a conversation with someone that said, hey, last night we started Shutter Island. We're like 20 minutes in. And
Right.
then you're like, here's the ending.
Yeah, right. So there are different contexts, right?
Yes.
But with that one, where it's just so classic,
Yeah,
why do you think someone would do that? What would drive them to override? Because I'm also assuming this person isn't a psychopath.
No.
So
they're
what
a
would
nice person.
what would override?
Well, it's bizarre because they got very excited that I had mentioned that I was watching this.
Right.
And so in the excitement, they mentioned the strongest emotional moment they had in the series, which is this spoiler.
Right.
And I guess they for a second forgot the context that, oh, right, they're just watching it and they just told me that.
Yeah.
And they just told me exactly where they're at.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think what you're saying is they get so giddy with excitement that they get lost in their own emotional enjoyment of their experience of the show, and they just have to say this thing as if they were just by themselves, like if they were just kind of talking to themselves, they'd be like, oh God, remember that one moment? Because they're reflecting, because they're not saying it for your benefit, because they know that you don't know that yet. So that's one angle. I think another angle is that they are so, I think, we all want to be smart. We all want to know things.
Right.
Like the analogy that I have is that when I lived downtown, if you remember, and right outside my door was basically the Space Needle.
Right.
And there's a lot of other tourist attractions down there. And I would frequently run into groups of tourists, and they would have that tourist map. It's real cartoony.
Sure.
And it's a terrible map because the streets are all cartoonishly drawn and not easily followed, and it condenses things to make them look cutesy, and it's hard to find your way
the
around.
Distances are off.
Right, the distances are off.
Yeah.
And that section of town, from my memory of taking Washington and Seattle history in high school, you had two builders. I think Denny was one, and maybe Stewart was another.
Oh.
And they both started a different system of grid for the streets.
That explains a lot.
Because right there at the Space Needle
Oh my gosh.
is where you have one grid that runs into a 45-degree angle into another grid.
Yeah.
And so all those streets have to be, real wonkily designed, like the 5 Point Cafe, that kind of area. And so it's confusing to people. And even though I was busy going to work or something, I would walk over to these random strangers and ask if they needed my help, and it felt good to help them. It's altruistic, but I also got a certain jolly out of being smart,
Right.
and knowing things.
You know the area.
Yeah.
Right. I have the same feeling when I can't correct someone in Spanish. Like someone's learning Spanish and they pronounce something a little different, and I'm like, oh, it's actually blah blah blah. I'm like, it's carro.
Yeah.
I get this like narcissistic.
Right. Even
lift.
though you probably, if you stopped and thought about it, they're not at that level yet.
No.
It doesn't really matter.
And I didn't earn my stripes with some 50-year struggle. I just learned it as a baby. But
Well,
I still get this like.
Well, neither did
ooh.
I. that's kind of the thing.
Yeah.
The person watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer didn't earn
Right, they just
that
watched the
knowledge.
show.
They just goddamn watched the show. But we all like to be
We all
smart.
like it, yeah.
And I think that it's really hard to restrain oneself when there's an opportunity to know something when other people don't know that thing. And I think it overrides their common sense to not spoil the show.
Yeah, I mean, I had two chronic examples. One was a friend that always did it. We would be watching things regularly, and he would just spoil it. And we're like, stop it. Okay. But the other one, Dave, my friend Dave, he comes home. We're in college. We're rooming in the same house. He comes home from class one day or something, and he's just, I guess that day he watched this movie with John Travolta called, not Powder. That was the one with Kevin Spacey. The other one, Phenomenon or something.
Yeah, I remember
that. Spoiler alert, because I had not watched it. In fact, I never watched it because Dave comes home. He's like, "Oh my gosh, I watched Phenomenon." I'm like, "Oh yeah." He's like, "Have you watched it?" I'm like, "No." "Oh, it's a tumor." I mean, dude.
Yeah, like something's going on there because especially in a situation like that, you don't even know the plot.
I don't know anything.
So what? And here's my other just random observation that you mentioned that the person that did this to you is really nice, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe above average nice.
Yeah.
David is above
Very
average.
nice. Yeah.
Above average nice, like not intrusive,
Yeah.
not an overtalker,
No.
not a loudmouth. All the people that I know do this are much more likely to be like that.
That's so weird.
So I don't know what that connection is because it doesn't seem logical.
Because you would imagine it'd be like the malicious, like, haha.
Or you and me who talk too much.
Yeah.
We're quick.
Like,
we're quick.
Sorry.
We're quick to say things.
Yeah.
We're especially compared to these other people, we're way more impulsive with our mouths.
Right.
But we wouldn't do that.
That's so weird.
But they do. So is it that they finally have something that they can share that seems relevant and it kind of excites them or something? Or are they secretly like wanting to ruin everyone's life and the niceness is just a big act? I'm just joking.
Yeah. But it was so funny because you're right. You're so right about that. The sense I got in that moment was that he was so excited to share this information that his brain short-circuited.
Right.
Because he literally asks me, "Have you seen it?" Yeah. And it is after I say clearly,
okay, well, because
no.
If you had seen it, he wouldn't have said that because you would know it was a tumor.
Or he would be less excited because it's not a revelation or something.
But I don't think so, because if you said, "Oh yeah, I saw it," then
he's like, "Oh yeah."
Well, yeah. Like what he's going to do? Wasn't it weird when it was a tumor? He probably wouldn't say that. You know?
And so I looked at him. I was like, "What, Dave? Like I just said no."
Yeah. Yeah. And they never have a good answer.
He was like, oh, right. Oh my God.
Yeah. All right. Let's take a break. We get back. More of this. What do you say?
Let's do it.
Okay. We're back from the break. So, Berto, I got you and your family some merch.
What?
So here are some shirts for you and your wife. And
Take care of yourself.
And I got you some mugs as well.
Oh, nice.
For the cabinets.
Oh, I love this color blue.
That's the classic Psychology in Seattle sky blue.
Piss. Yeah. And I love these. Oh, thank you very much.
What shirts did I get for you?
I got a take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And then I got
a yikes shirt.
Oh, yikes.
Yeah. And and I think...
And then a different color.
I think a couple of those are for your wife.
Oh, yeah. And then just Psychology in Seattle. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was
gracias.
Because after our anniversary show, you brought over 15 shirts and...
I didn't have enough.
You brought over all of your piss merch stuff, but you only had like a handful. And I was like, oh man, I have a closet. Because for me, Stacy always orders them as a sample to see if they look okay, because you never know.
That makes sense.
And so I have a lot of... All right, speaking of Sense. Let's talk about The Sixth Sense. But before we do that, let's do an OPP, Berto.
OPP.
Oh, you can do better than that.
OPP.
That's better. So these people became patrons all the way back in mid-2021 and have stayed patrons ever since. We have Crystal from Portsmouth, Virginia, Paul from New Jersey, Caitlin from Swanee, Kansas, Thazen from Chino, California, Jackie from Westminster, California.
Isn't Chino where they have that, like, is it? Oh, no, it's Chico. Chico State is like the party school. Never mind.
Yeah, been to Chico, and that's where Aaron Rodgers is from, and my sister-in-law. Kristen is from Oakland, California.
Oh.
Elfin is from Harlingen, Texas. Alexis from Cambridge, Mass. Ooh. Jazz from Cypress, California. Want to be Anon, but is from Minnesota.
And you succeeded.
Yeah. Alan from Everett, Mass. Whoa. Alan is from Everett, Massachusetts.
Oh, Everett, Massachusetts.
I didn't know. Yeah, it makes sense, though. Brianna from Palmdale, California. Calvin from Columbia, Maryland. Mariana from El Paso, Texas. I've been there. Terry from Oceanside, California. Carrie from Altoona, Pennsylvania. Rakia from Wilson, North Carolina. Shauna from Georgetown, Texas. Camille from Brooklyn, New York. Turtle.
Oh, nice.
Turtle from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Abigail from Pittsburgh. Sandy from New York. Alexander from Michigan. Katie from St. Louis, Missouri. Melissa from Riverton, Illinois.
Whoa.
David from Selah, Washington. That's how you pronounce it, right? Selah? Yeah.
I don't think I've heard of Selah.
It's a small town that we will see on as an exit, and I'm forgetting what I think it might be.
Wait, is it C? Is it with
no,
a C?
it's S S-E. Excuse me, listeners, while I look up where Selah is.
Is it a native word, do you think?
Probably, yeah.
Huh.
I'm looking at where it is, and it is on Google Maps. I'm talking to Buy Me Time. Yeah, it's near Yakima.
Oh,
It's on the way to Yakima off of Ellensburg from I-90.
Nice.
And David, my Japanese ancestors are from Yakima, Wapato specifically. Jamie from Wilmington, North Carolina, and Ivana from good old Linwood, Washington.
Ooh,
Thank you for being a patron and staying a patron through thick and thin, y'all. Sixth Sense, 1999. It is a movie about, what psychological concept would you say it's about?
Well, it's interesting because on the one hand, the child, if we are to believe
how to see people disorder, how to see dead people disorder,
right? If we're to believe that the movie is just what you see before the big spoiler alert reveal at the end, then yeah, of course no one would believe that the child's actually seeing dead people. So you would think what's happening is that a therapist is treating a child who is seeing things. Maybe he's he's having a bit of a psychotic break or something.
Okay. Well, let me comment on
actually
that.
Seeing
let me
things.
comment on that. Given his age, how old do you think he's? Like 10, 12 maybe?
Yeah, I don't even think 12.
He is not old enough for hallucinations like that. It can happen, of course, and there are rare cases, but it's extremely rare to develop those kinds of delusions. Plus, even if it was something like schizophrenia or some sort of delusional disorder, it, again, plays out very cinematically and without a lot of the kind of side effects that come along with those symptoms. So
but if you think about like that's what we're seeing.
Right.
But the parent or the people around the child would probably be like, well, obviously he's not seeing any of that stuff. He's probably having some adjustment issues. He's having some emotional problems.
Right, right. But if we look at Bruce Willis's character, what does he suffer from?
Are you saying the actual true character?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, ghost denial disorder.
Right. So it's not a thing in the DSM, or it's not easily...
Yeah.
I guess you could start to go in the direction of some sort of psychosis that anti-hallucinates, just like chooses to not see something. But a more specific word is grief, that, he...
Oh, right.
Spoiler alert, M. Night Shyamalan movie.
What a twist!
He died, and now he's a ghost.
Yeah.
And he can't face that, right?
Yeah.
And denial's powerful, but not that powerful. For someone to be in denial of, say, their drug addiction, it's not like you don't see the drugs before you.
No.
It's not like you don't recognize the events that people would call would be consequences. You know, like if you get fired, it's not like you go into denial and say, no, I'm not. I mean, maybe for a day, but not for a long time.
You see it even in like when they uncover the secrets of the pyramids, all the pharaohs and stuff like that.
God, every time. Hey, you got to eventually get to jokes about that. Like you got to come with a chambered actual thing about Egypt that is actually related, because I feel like you might have even done that once.
I have done this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then you got to go to another layer.
Sure.
Where there's maybe a word that sounds like Egypt.
Yeah.
And I feel like, or you just beat this dead horse, and
I think the horse.
And you get a laugh out of it while I groan. He's basically in denial of the fact that he's dead, Bruce Willis's character, and it's not really anything psychological. So, according to ChatGPT, which is pulling from a bunch of listicles online, Sixth Sense is probably a common one that comes up. Could we say it's a psychological film? Yeah. It's not a shoot 'em up. It's not a heist movie. It's not a Lord of the Rings movie. It's
Well, because even without the twist, which by the way, when I saw that movie, I loved it.
Yeah.
And I was ready to. I thought the movie was ending, and I was already happy. Like I was like, "Whoa, this was a great movie."
Before the twist.
Oh, before the twist.
Wow.
I was like, "This is a great movie. This was great." I was so happy. The fact that there was a twist was like, I don't know, you went to Disneyland, you had a wonderful 3 days, everything went great, your brother knocked a whole bunch of drinks off a tray, you laughed about it, it's great.
And then you get to see the pyramids.
And then you're in denial, yes. No, but seriously, like it was so good. And if you look at just that part of the movie before the twist, you have to accept, okay, it's a movie kind of about ghosts, but the topic, the way it chooses to tackle that was kind of novel. Mm-hmm. It was about like, what would happen if someone's saying they're seeing ghosts, and like you call it there, and it's a kid, and you call it therapist, and that relationship that develops. And that's why I thought at the time, like this guy Shyamalan really had something interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So many movies will rely on the twist, and TV shows for that matter. And like a lot of the Harry Potter movies, I hate to say this, particularly the later ones, it's all about the twist, and not about telling a good story. I always say this. It's like a Scooby-Doo episode. You present a bunch of weird, unexplainable things, and then at the very end, and you give no ability for the audience to garner or to figure out or have questions or theories. It's
sort of if you go back and you watch the Scooby-Doo series from the beginning,
yeah,
it's all laid out for you.
Yeah, and then at the very end, someone just tells you what was going on, and if you're not really thinking about it, or you're 7 years old, then you're like, whoa,
right?
But you were just manipulated for the entirety of the story, and then someone just came in and like Dumbledore, and he just tells you what happened, in like 4 pages at the end of the book, and you're like, oh, great writing,
My daughters both got big time into Scooby-Doo, because not only did they like watching the old ones, but they had new ones that were pretty fun, and I would watch.
Like them. How new? Because I remember there was 80s ones, like with Scrappy Doo.
These were from like 10 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They came out with a new series. And I really enjoyed them too. But I remember like watching them with them, especially the old ones, where I'm like, I mean, what you're showing me is happening right now is not going to be explainable by the little fluorescent paint that they're wearing later in the episode.
Right. Yeah. Not only that, but they have actual supernatural stuff happen.
Yeah.
And then at the end, they're like,
well, it was a pulley system.
And you're like, that doesn't work that way. But again, 7.
But it was so fun.
but so with M. Night Shyamalan, he had a great movie, as you're saying, and then there's a twist, and you're like, whoa, and then it adds to the movie like in a whole other way. And I remember when M. Night started making more movies, like maybe the second movie he made after that.
Second was Unbreakable.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Well, that was a good movie.
Yeah, that was good, which is why I thought he was on a roll.
Right. Maybe it was like a couple more. I just remember thinking, M. Night, you need to discard the not
everything has to be a twist.
Like if you're following a an outline. Like, scrap that outline.
Yeah, because the third one was Signs.
Right, which I appreciated.
75% of the movie is fantastic, and then the twist just is stupid.
Yeah, but I wasn't expecting much to begin with, so I thought it was fine. A lot of people hate it. I'm sort of coming at it both ways, because on one hand, I actually like his movies more than other people. I feel like he gets a lot of hate. I feel like I don't like Sixth Sense and Unbreakable as much as other people do, and I don't dislike. Like, what was the one where they're a cult and?
Yeah, well,
what was that one?
Wait, are you talking about the Village?
The Village.
The Village. Yeah. I like the Village. Okay,
I never saw Avatar, which apparently is like horrendous. The one where they're in the elevator, I kind of liked. Devil, is it?
Devil.
Anyway, next movie here. So Sixth Sense, I gave it an 8 out of 10 apparently back in the day. Next movie is Spellbound, 1945, Hitchcock. Have you seen this movie?
Oh, don't know. Maybe. But
I haven't seen it. I've seen a number of Hitchcock movies. I haven't seen them. I looked up the plot. A psychiatrist protects the identity of an amnesia patient accused of murder while attempting to recover his memory.
But who's the actor?
From my memory, it's...
you trying to recover your memory?
It's Cary Grant, I believe.
See, I think I have seen it, because my wife...
He's been in a lot of movies. He's been in a lot of Hitchcock. I'm talking out of my ass. It's been a while since...
So my wife's favorite actor when we were younger was Cary Grant. And so I watched way many more Cary Grant movies than
maybe you saw Spellbound.
I think I did see it.
But if I'm going to take a guess and say that it had that typical presentation of amnesia that is not a human phenomenon,
where you hit your head and you don't remember
and you forget like a very specific sort of thing, and then you can easily remember it, that kind of thing. The next movie on the list that ChatGPT identified as a psychological movie is Girl Interrupted.
Oh yeah,
1999, Winona Ryder, Angelina Jolie.
Right.
What do you remember about this movie?
Suicide attempts or something.
Yeah. So I saw it in the theaters in 1999 and never saw it again because I didn't like it. I was already a therapist, and I gave it a 5 out of 10, which is like, if you have nothing else to watch, I suppose it's fine. And today I watched some scenes from it, and I'm guessing if I watched it today, I'd probably even give it a lower rating.
If I remember right, there are several girls, and are they in a sanatorium?
Yeah.
And at least one of them is quite depressed and tries to commit suicide.
Yeah, they have... I mean, it's better than your One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, representation of patients. A movie I love, obviously, but it has, if there's one criticism, it's the stereotypical cartoonish portrayal of mental health patients. It's comical.
Sure.
And so there's like 5 or 6 girls in this inpatient unit, including Winona Ryder, and it's I think in the 50s or something, 60s maybe, and it is a lot more sympathetic and more 3-dimensional with the characters from my memory, but at the very least, it doesn't portray them as like crazy. They're all struggling with trauma and with being ostracized. I think sexism is a theme as well. I think it tackles a lot of things. And I was watching some scenes from the movie today, and that movie is jam-packed with major stars, people that were not very well known, like the actress from Handmaid's Tale.
Oh yeah. She was in that.
The Mad Men. Yeah. As a very young.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Tambor is in it. Anyway. So, supposedly, Winona Ryder's character is diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And I don't know if that's official. Well, I do know it's official because it's literally in the movie. She looks at her file, and the parents and the psychiatrist talk about her having borderline. And so it doesn't depict Winona Ryder's character does not have any any symptoms even close to borderline.
So like they didn't know, or they didn't have a consultant, or
so they either were portraying a young woman who was misdiagnosed with borderline because
that could be, I suppose.
Right.
Yeah.
Or they're doing that very typical Hollywood thing where they want to have the protagonist, and maybe earlier drafts had the protagonist as actually suffering from the disorder, and thus would have some problematic behaviors and problematic distortions of perception, but they don't want the protagonist to be unlikable or unrelatable, so they just whitewash the whole thing and then claim that she's borderline, or sprinkle in a couple scenes or moments where she's a little emotional or something.
Yeah.
And in 1999, I was a therapist, and I had just I was really in the thick of developing all of the theories that I have about borderline and personality in general. I had a number of clients that were really fortuitous for me in my earlier career that really taught me, week in and week out,
like this is what
this is what borderline is, and this is what relational trauma is. Like all the things that I know today about that were, solidly established by 1999, and I was very passionate about it. And especially back then, there was a lot of misinformation about it. A lot more therapists back then would just write off people with borderline. And so I think
they wouldn't treat them, or they would say it's not a problem.
They wouldn't treat them. They would say they're untreatable.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, yeah. And I could bore with the details, but
I'm bored already.
And so I'm watching this movie, and I remember thinking, like, what the fuck, Hollywood? This is not borderline. All right. Let's take a break. We get back. More of them. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right, back from the break. So I'm looking at the time, and I'm thinking that we're not going to get to the race representation. We'll get to that in the next episode.
Okay.
But let's do another OPP, Berto.
OPP.
So I've been neglecting doing OPPs, and so I'm really needing to kind of catch up. So I'm because my whole idea when I started to do these OPPs was probably 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And I thought I want to make sure in every episode we thank actual names of people who have stayed patrons for a long time, not necessarily recent patrons, but long-term patrons, because those folks are absolute. It's one thing to sign, because some people do, which I don't fault them for a variety of reasons. They'll sign up for a month and then cancel.
Yeah.
And God bless them. Most people don't even do that, so that's great. But really, what is the reason why you and I are here is because people sign up to be a patron, and then they stay a patron,
right?
And then that's when you can plan for the future, and you're truly supporting the ongoing production of this thing. And I've said this before, but if you don't remember, dear listener, the majority of my family's income is Patreon.
Yeah.
By far. So I wouldn't be able to do any of this. I would have, if there were even like half the patrons, I would have to go back to the university. I'd have to take on a bunch of clients.
The content would decline precipitously.
Right. So I set out to do this, but I keep forgetting to do it. And then lately I've been like, I need to catch up. So that's why I'm doing more. So all these people are from God knows where. They didn't list where they're from, and they all became patrons in mid-2021. We got Matthew, Hannah, Sumya, Viv, Carly, Katerina, Aaron, Babs. That's a good name, Babs. Per, Lori, Jill, Daria. That's a nice name, Daria.
Remember that Daria show?
Yeah. Adriana. Remember Adriana from The Sopranos.
Oh, yeah.
I watch also a lot of Sopranos clips every night before I go to bed, which probably doesn't do wonders for my dreams.
Sleep.
We have Cameron. Name a movie with Cameron in it.
James Cameron, Avatar.
No,
Cameron Crowe.
A character with
Oh,
Cameron.
yeah. Well, Bueller. Ferris Bueller.
Okay, good. I was going to get real upset. Lorelai. There's a TV show that you probably don't know called Gilmore Girls.
Yeah, Gilmore Girls.
Okay.
I know Lorelai.
Sherry. Do we know any Sherrys? There's got to be a lot of Sherry characters.
There's Cheryl in Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Okay. Kelsey Grammer.
Yeah.
Kelsey.
Not a character name. But.
Midella.
Mirella.
Danny. We got Ava or Eva. Atlas. Good old Atlas. Someone named Atlas. That's pretty cool. Aaron Brockovich.
Yeah.
Caitlin. Any Caitlins in movies? Nothing's coming to mind. Dr. Yukino.
Oh.
There's got to be at least 10 movies I can name off the top of my head with a Dr. Yukino. We have Vanna. We have MB.
Wait, Vanna reminds me of Stuck in a Closet with Vanna White. Remember that Weird Al song?
I don't. MB. Wasn't our friend's DJ name MB?
Yeah, DJ MB.
Yeah. Soul Freed. Christian. Joyce. Alex. When I think of Joyce, I think of Three's Company. Joyce DeWitt.
Oh,
Joyce
sure.
DeWitt. Joyce is a great name.
Yeah.
And there probably isn't anyone younger than 55 named Joyce.
And you can't spell Joyce without CE.
We have Alex, and the movie with Alex is Clockwork Orange.
Yes.
Hillary, AP, which might be, well, I don't know. Naz, Anu, Rosie from Citizen Kane.
Is there a Rosebud?
Rosebud, oh yeah. Inez, Joe, Jacob.
Versus the volcano.
Megana, and JS. All from God Knows Where. Thank you for being a patron and staying a patron and paying my bills and paying a slight amount of Berto bills as well.
Berto bills.
So, Berto, it's been a while since we've done this. If you were a character in a psychological movie and you were trying to convince the people right now who are not patrons to become patrons, and he had a monologue that was at the climax of the movie, what would he sound like?
The thing is that I don't even understand why I would do that, because there's nothing like, you're saying there's something wrong with me. There is nothing wrong with me. There's never been something wrong with me. I keep telling everyone. I keep telling you. I keep telling you. I keep telling you. There's nothing wrong with me. It's you. It's all you. You are the wrong ones. And if you don't believe me, just look outside. There's a line of people waiting to agree with me, and they're called patrons. You too can join them. Go outside, become a patron. I'm fine. I'm fine. Go away.
That's pretty good. Yeah. Your meta mind really comes in handy sometimes.
That was just a reenactment from one of my actual therapy sessions.
Yeah. So the next movie, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, 1975. We did a deep dive on this movie with Colin. I gave it a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, so good.
I really like it. I probably should bump that up to a 10. It feels bad. But 9 to me is like basically
that's great, like fantastic.
Perfect movie, you know?
Yeah.
Now, accuracy, as I said, in my book, the stereotypical, because I've heard that like Danny DeVito talks about how they prepped for that movie, and from my memory, the director just said, look, I just want you to just be your character and maybe even be crazy. I don't know.
Yeah.
And we're going to film without intruding. And so just improv.
Do your thing.
And so you have a bunch of actors who probably have some, a lot of them are comedic actors. I don't know if they were at the time, but they have that angle or something. And the way that it comes across is cartoonish. Now, the rest of it could absolutely all happen.
Sure.
From Nurse Ratched to the lobotomies, to the electroconvulsive therapy, to the racism against the Native American guy, to the young man who has a stutter, who feels very intruded upon by his own mom and eventually kills himself. All that is almost too real, because in the 70s, they were really making some very gritty, real movies with actors that were method acting or something, and there's no makeup.
They would take a lot of risks, man.
Yeah, the way that it looked, the way movies, the themes and the, like with Godfather, even when you watch that movie, it's like, it feels like you're watching a documentary.
Yeah.
There's no stylized speaking, really. A lot of shots kind of from afar. You're not right up in people's faces.
Yeah.
The dialogue is, natural sounding. Like when Michael Corleone kills those two guys in the restaurant, and the gun is this simple little revolver. And in other movies today, I don't know, it would just look different. It would feel different. Yeah. And One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is an example of that. The other movie, Hitchcock, 2012, haven't seen it. It apparently is the story of the relationship between Alfred Hitchcock and his wife.
Oh, I see what you're saying. The movie Hitchcock that came out in 2012. I was thinking, was there a movie that Hitchcock made called 2012?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
So I never saw that, but apparently it's psychological, so I can't really comment on it.
Who played Hitchcock?
I don't know. Donnie Darko, 2001.
Ooh, and its sequel, S. Darko. Did you ever see the sequel?
No.
It was so bad. It's like, I don't know which one's worse, American Psycho 2 or S. Darko. Probably S. Darko.
I'm guessing that S. Darko is just a lot of that bunny thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of jump scares.
Yeah. No connection other than that.
Yeah.
And it's horrible. It's stupid.
I mean, I guess if you call it S. Darko, anyone could make a movie S. Darko. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you don't have a trademark on it.
But Donnie Darko was very weird and entertaining.
Yeah, I gave it a 7 out of 10, which means that I must have liked it, but I did not like it as much as other people did. I mean, other people were just like, oh my God, just blown away by it. But to me, I remember feeling like the ending was kind of a cop-out in that, all these weird things are happening, and then all of a sudden this like fantastical ending, and then it ends, right?
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, well, but what about that one thing? Like, what was that?
Yeah.
What was it? Was there time travel? I don't understand.
Right.
And with David Lynch, it has that all the time. Yeah. But
in this case, it was a little too.
But this one, it just felt like they ran out of money. I
felt the same way actually. So I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really interesting. What's his name is a very entertaining character or actor.
Gyllenhaal.
But I also, at the end, I was like, okay, because they had the whole quantum, like all the physics, metaphysics stuff, and I was like, oh, okay, but I didn't feel the ending because I didn't have that moment. It was like, oh, whoa,
right.
It was more like, okay, but I enjoyed the movie. The characters were very entertaining. It was very,
yeah, and it had some scary moments.
Yeah.
It was charming in its way. Again, 7 out of 10. I think it's supposed to be portraying schizophrenia, right? Is it suggested that he might be delusional and hallucinating?
Well, I think that's the external idea, but it seemed like there was something actually happening.
Oh, okay.
That was a little quantum nature about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then it's not a psychological movie. It's basically science fiction in a way or something.
So. It's science fiction, yes.
Silence of the Lambs.
Oh, my gosh.
1991.
Oh, what a movie.
1991.
I know, right?
Well, you probably remember because you were in high school.
Yeah.
So it's an easy sort of time stamp that you could put on it.
Yeah.
To me, I was in college, but I knew I wasn't in high school, but I wouldn't have put it that far back. If I was to take a guess, I would have said it was like late 90s even. But anyway. So
and I'm imagining I didn't see it in the theater. I'm imagining that I only saw it rented. Which is a sad thing because that would have been epic to see in the theater.
Yeah, pretty sure I saw it in the theater.
But I love that movie.
Yeah, I gave it a 7 out of 10. back then when I saw it, because so back then IMDb didn't exist, but I was keeping an Excel spreadsheet with all my ratings.
Yeah.
And then when IMDb came out in, I don't know, 97 or 8 or something, I transferred them all over to IMDb. Anyway, so, and whenever I see a movie, I immediately rate it and everything.
Yeah.
So I've been keeping up on that. And so apparently I gave it a 7 out of 10 when I was 20 years old.
Well, back then there was still. I've talked about another aspect. When I was a kid, I remember my grandma's sister. Her and I would listen to a radio program that came on every day. Radio, imagine that. And it was about these adventures in the Middle East, like in the far off deserts and like all these things. And at that time, and this was the early 80s. I really felt like there were these unexplored parts of the world, and there weren't easy ways to even find information about them, right? Because like we didn't own an encyclopedia in my house in Colombia, in Bogota. I had a dictionary, and there were a couple of books about this and that. I couldn't go on the internet. There's no internet. TV might show me a program about something in some country if it's playing at the time. There's no on-demand cable or anything. And at the time I couldn't even go rent movies or anything. So listening to the radio and hearing about these faraway lands, I really believed, there must be that must exist. This must exist. So when I saw the Silence of the Lambs in the early 90s, it was still in a time period where I could believe that there are these eccentric genius psychopaths stowed away in jail cells.
Oh yeah.
And whereas nowadays, like you'd know that, well, no, this would be on YouTube. Like someone would have made a video of these people. So I guess these people don't really exist.
Well, that's you. I mean, I think most people still
imagine
think,
that
when they think of a sadistic psychopathic killer, they think of Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah. No, you're probably right.
They think of someone that is a contradiction.
It's the aspect of, it's similar to how when Men in Black came out or any of these movies about like the secret government stuff, I always used to think, who knows the crazy stuff that the government doesn't tell us about.
Yeah.
Similarly, I thought, there must be these crazy genius level psychopaths stowed away in prisons.
Yeah. 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 When I was...
And they carry them out with muscles in their faces.
My analogous thing is when I was a kid, there was a Leonard Nimoy narrated show called In Search Of.
Oh, okay.
And it was a bunch of pseudoscientific things like UFOs and Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot. And it was, from my memory, basically just, it was just asking questions, but it certainly wasn't providing much of a skeptical commentary.
Well, and that's a little unfair because you associate Nimoy with like this rational being, and he's the one telling you about this.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Spock is telling me this logical thing, and I absolutely believed all that stuff, and so with Silence of the Lambs, tell me if this is because you remember this movie better than I do, I'm sure. Hannibal Lecter is considered a genius.
Yeah.
Okay. So can you have a psychopathic genius? I suppose. But name one.
But not only was he a genius, because you could imagine a psychopath who happens to have a very high IQ, but they're still a dysfunctional individual. But he was a highly accomplished surgeon, very well respected, very wealthy, all these things. Lecturer,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Are there psychopathic people who pass as regular suburban people? Yeah. Like what was the killer? They portrayed him.
The guy the guy in Long Island, or
I don't know, but there was a guy from history that they portrayed in that TV show we watched, David Fincher.
The
Manhunter with. Or Mindhunter?
Yeah, what is it? Mindhunter. Mindhunter. The tall dude, the very tall dude, right?
Well, the one I'm thinking of was the electrician. Well, Ed
Kemper.
Ed Kemper. I don't think anyone would call him a genius,
but he was very smart, right?
I don't remember. Anyway, the point is like, can you have a smart-ish serial killer like I guess the Golden State Killer? He has never been caught, to my knowledge, and seemingly covered his tracks a lot, that kind of thing. But a lot of it just could be luck.
Or the Zodiac killer with all the weird
Well, that's what I mean.
symbols.
That's what I mean. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm getting them all mixed up.
Yeah.
The point is that name one person in history that is like Hannibal Lecter. There's no one with that combination, right? But I would say half of Americans believe that every psychopathic killer has those qualities. The other thing is, of course, he's a serial killer. He's a cannibal, and yet the question is, it kind of seems like he cares about Jodie Foster in the end.
Very much so. He's got a lot of empathy, as
Right.
most psychopaths do.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, no. What's interesting is that, I mean, you could say it's transactional, but
Right.
it isn't. It isn't
Right.
just transactional.
It is from my memory, but it's also the way it's delivered. You can tell, but maybe you know a detail where it's like, well, he wouldn't do that if it was just transactional.
No, because he's actually trying to help her as a therapist. Now, you could say maybe that's, okay, to tie it back to what we were saying about giving a spoiler, maybe that's just because he's like, oh, I can help her. That feeds my ego, I suppose. But there's a lot of moments in that movie where he lays the groundwork for her to actually have a realization and like make progress as a person and save her life ultimately.
Yeah.
And I don't know. And even at the end, because he calls her after he's fled, there seems to be almost a paternal moment.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, a little out of character.
Right. And of course, the writers,
Yeah.
they're thinking, well, this is our one of our main characters. And here's the setup. He's this serial killer. He's this horrible person. But the movie is about a relationship between him and Jodie Foster's character. So we can't have him actually be a psychopathic serial killer.
Right.
But we
Because
need
you
to
have to develop some empathy for that guy.
Right. We need to set it up that he is that. So they tell us all that, and then he acts weird, like fava beans, and all that
And a
kind of
bottle
stuff.
of Chianti.
Like it's all this talk, and then by the end of the movie, he's a very likable, empathetic
well, in
character.
fact, the only people he kills apparently deserve it.
Right. And then the ending scene is when he's following the
bad guy,
psychiatrist,
yeah.
right? Or not the bad guy.
He's following a bad guy.
Oh.
He's following a guy that screwed over. Well, okay, maybe it was his.
In my
his
mind, I remember
psychiatrist.
thinking, because, the whole theater, I remember erupting and cheering as he's following this guy. And I'm thinking, he doesn't deserve to be killed and eaten.
Right, I know. But
Like-
it was an annoying character. That's why everyone was like, yeah.
Yeah, annoying, right? Like, so in terms of accuracy,
But
no.
it's similar, when we were talking about Ghostbusters and the head of the EPA guy or the EPA guy. He is annoying. He is a bit of a jerk.
Yeah.
But everyone cheers like loudly when
Yeah.
when they show him up. It's like, well, he was kind of doing his job and he was right about that.
Yeah. What world do you want to live in where, 3 random dudes can have a nuclear reactor in the basement of a renovated firehouse in the middle of Manhattan that has, some sort of science around it, and it's filled with like a bunch of, supernatural creatures that could kill everyone in the world. Like, maybe there's a better way.
Now, if you want to ask the question, like, why did he think shutting it down was the right approach?
Right. That was just stupid. Another movie that ChatGPT spat out is Ordinary People. And by the way, I want to say that the list is pretty good.
Yeah.
Like, it's not my list, but it's probably better than most lists that you would find online.
Sure.
So
let's remember, it is derived from including lists that are published.
that's what I'm saying. But that whatever the neuronal algorithm or development of pathways that it's developing, how it's learning to learn and learning to answer questions, it's impressive that it's even at this point, the free version, it's pretty good, pretty useful. Like, if I were to ask the internet to tell me a list, I think ChatGPT would be a better source
a random person. Yeah.
than a random article.
Yeah.
And the other thing with random articles, you get all the ads, and sometimes you have to click through every single stupid page.
Right.
Whereas with ChatGPT, it just lists them out.
Yeah.
No ads, no fluff. No, because some articles they'll have these long intros.
Oh, the worst thing, and it always gets me. I'll see, and by the way, CNN. You'd think you go to CNN, it's like a news site. It's filled with those stupid ad articles that it looks like an article, and you click it, and it's one of those web pages where all you see is one thing at a time, and you have to click next, and the rest, 80% of the page is advertisements. Mm-hmm. And it drives me nuts. And yeah.
Well, stop clicking on boner pills.
But I need them.
And when you buy them, don't put them in your... No, just... Ordinary People, 1980, it is often cited as the most therapy-ish psychological movie because it's about a family that lost one of the boys to suicide. And Timothy Hutton plays the other kid, I believe. And Judd Hirsch plays the therapist. And Mary Tyler Moore, I think, plays the mom off character as off typecast as a not likable mother. She's almost like the villain in a sense, but it's about PTSD, suicide, grief. And it's been a while since I've seen the movie.
I don't know that I ever saw it.
Yeah, it's not a popular movie that people watch again. There's certain movies from 1980 that are talked about, but Ordinary People not so much. And it doesn't really, it's not fantastical. There might be some inaccuracies that I'm not remembering. The next movie is Pi from 1998. Berto and
it's a little bit along the lines of The Beautiful Mind.
How so?
It's like the obsession part, the obsession driving someone kind of crazy down a path. Like in real life, do you know the mathematician Cantor?
Yeah, I think so.
He was, one of the big things he innovated was a way to think and talk and do calculations with infinities. And he went crazy, quote unquote. He went insane. I don't know what diagnosis it would have been, but he became non-functional, let's say. And it was along these lines of the obsession with his infinities.
Well, so I don't know this story, but a common actual event that will happen is you will have, well, one, I'll say that if you have literally hundreds of known historical mathematicians, then on average, some of them are going to develop things like schizophrenia or something. Right. And that should be expected. It would be weird if that didn't happen.
Right.
So there's that. Two, for some people, say there's some schizoaffective or there's some bipolar, they get manic at times. And while they're hypomanic, they have a lot of energy and they might be willing to take a lot of risks that if they already have a talent and a genius, then they can capitalize on that in those moments and maybe make strides that they wouldn't have made otherwise.
Interesting.
But once they become actual manic, and certainly when they become depressed, there's not a lot of work, or at least viable work, that's going to be accomplished. Yeah. So might someone on their way to full-blown schizoaffective or bipolar have a period of time when they're having moments of hypomania where they become very prolific and some of their seminal work is from them. Yeah. But to attribute the mathematical genius or the creativity to schizophrenia is what people do.
Yeah.
Might there be some examples that you could maybe point to, I suppose, but when you actually on the ground work with people with psychosis, it's not like it is in the movies. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of distress. Right. Now, you can have a lot of not distress. You can have a lot of happiness and being calm, for sure. But this notion that, because the way they depict it, like in A Beautiful Mind, is that, or in that other movie with Jamie Foxx, where he's a a violinist.
Oh, I didn't see that.
And what's his face plays a journalist. Iron Man plays a journalist that helps him. It's like a true story.
Okay.
Anyway, they make these connections with like, oh my God, they're otherworldly. They're schizophrenia, which is a problem and marginalizes them. But their brain is so genius that they're like going beyond the bounds of normal human intelligence capabilities, and their musical abilities are just flying all over the place, and they're again, might that happen for some people, I suppose, but the stories that I hear, I'm not convinced. Now, for some people, when they're 22 and fast forward in their life, they're 30 and they have full-blown schizophrenia. When they're 22, they might have early signs, but not full symptoms, that provide some stretching of their creativity. But they're probably already a genius in their field, regardless of the schizophrenia. And the freeing of their mind, it's similar with like LSD, like the Beatles and this kind of thing, might have helped them to go a little further with something. Because like with John Lennon taking LSD and writing in my life, the last
A Day in a Life.
A Day in a Life. It comes across, especially for the time, as like a drug-induced LSD trip, right? But we all know that John Lennon was a musical genius before he even heard about LSD, and the way he was progressing was in that direction anyway. And a lot of musicians will say, when they're being honest, including the Beatles themselves, that no, drugs were fun, but you couldn't write while you were, flying high. You might think you can, but the stuff, I think George Harrison one of them was saying that we would take these substances and sure, I would write all sorts of stuff. The next day I would look at it and it would all look like shit, So I had to be sober to actually write well.
Well, I like in a tiny, small way. I remember when I was much younger, it was a New Year's actually, and I was at one of those hotels, and I was very drunk, and I was writing songs. And I was very upset at my wife at the time, and I was writing all these songs, and I'm like, here, hang on to this. And she hung on to the papers. And the next day I was like, oh my gosh. Maybe 2 days later, because I was probably too long. I was like, all right, let me look at my genius stuff. And it's just all, random, angry stuff that at the time, in the moment, I was like, oh my God.
Now, could you have used it, and might some of it have been usable or interesting or different than the sort of writing you would do normally? Maybe.
Yeah, while I'm sober, I might be able to grab some of it. And
Right. So anyway.
But there's also that trope that is a literary and kind of like of the mad scientist. And I think I have a couple ideas. One of them is, if you think back like the Enlightenment period and stuff like that, like as some people started devoting themselves to science, it would have probably been a bit of a lonely and difficult discipline, a lot of time spent in ways that the average person might not understand. Like, they're in that lab and they just what is that stuff anyways? They got all these tubes, and the other day I saw an explosion or whatever. It seems crazy.
or magical.
Magical, crazy. And so I think that out of that and literary stories and stuff, it came to be like, oh yeah, the mad scientist. That's an archetype, the mad scientist.
Right.
And so in movies, it's not uncommon to see like the pairing of kind of genius with madness and maybe even evil. Like, sometimes those go together.
Yeah. And I'm sure there's been cultural investigations into where it comes from, like certain touchstones of literature or movies and suspicion from whatever, and I'm guessing in other cultures they don't necessarily have those associations,
Right.
So with Pi, Darren Aronofsky's first movie, I gave it 8 out of 10. I remember seeing it in 1998 and liking it, 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
It's a little rough. It's very cheap. The movie, I think I read online, was made for like $100,000 or something, which is like unheard of.
Right.
you got to buy film. You have to pay someone to like, manage the camera, that kind of thing. So very cheap movie, and really got Aronofsky off the ground, which is kind of weird because the movie is out there.
Yeah.
I'm surprised anyone would have tapped him to make, because his next movie was Requiem for a Dream.
Yeah.
But do you remember the plot of this movie?
Not that well. I remember. I remember the main dude is obsessed with the number. He's kind of a mathematician, right? And he's obsessed with. He's trying to find something specific. Like he's doing all these realizations, and then as the plot unfolds, there's things that he makes certain connections, but I don't remember.
Yeah, that's pretty good. He's trying to figure out how numbers play a role in how the universe is organized.
Right, and then he'll be like in a social moment, and then he'll like something will happen, and he's like, oh.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a Scooby-Doo episode in that way, but it's also the way it looks is that he might be going crazy, like he might be schizophrenic.
Right. Which is why I mentioned the similarity to the other stuff. Yeah.
But the way that I remember it is that he is so smart that he can actually see the matrix, that he's starting to discover God. He's starting to understand God and understand how everything works. And it's so overwhelming for his human brain that he literally takes a drill and drills into his own skull. That's how the movie ends. And then so you wonder, is he going to die? Then the very next scene, he's talking with this girl that he knows, and she's asking him about math stuff, and he apparently
lobotomized.
But he's not lobotomized.
Right. He's not like
he's totally fine. He's normal now. He doesn't have that genius anymore, and he's not distressed. He's content.
Yeah. So but he lost that part of his brain.
Right. He lost that ability.
Yeah.
And thus, I don't think even the writers would claim that it is even trying to represent schizophrenia, because, of course, drilling into your skull with... And it's also suggested that he might not have actually drilled into his skull, that he might have started, and because you don't see him do it, and he instead decided to just divorce himself from math so that he could survive contently in the world.
Oh, okay. I guess I always literally assumed that in a crude way he damaged a part of his brain that was making the obsession possible.
But if you did that, and they don't show his full personality, but he would have been what people would colloquially call a vegetable. You know what I mean? So in the next scene, he's acting like a regular person. He's conversing. He's quick on his feet, mentally.
Yeah. So it's more a metaphor, is what you're saying.
Right. So if people think it's about schizophrenia, I would say no, but I don't think it's setting out to be. Is it a psychological movie? Yeah, I would say Aronofsky's movies are always psychological. You know?
And that's the connection to the Cantor story I was telling, because in his case, when you're dealing with infinities, it is in a way you're touching on the ground of gods, right? And up until he came around, because like what's interesting is like if you learn a lot about how calculus came about, and like Newton and Leibniz and how these things came about. Nowadays we take for granted like, oh yeah, well I guess here's how you could find the area of a curve or whatever. But these were insane notions. And back in the Greek times, people weren't even they didn't even agree that motion was possible, because this guy Zeno had proposed these paradoxes of like, to move a meter you have to move half a meter, and to move half a meter you have to move a quarter of a meter, and so on, infinitely smaller, therefore you can't move. And people would be like, well, I guess you're right. So the notion of infinity was really hard to comprehend. And here comes this guy who not only like tackles like what infinity could be, but then he develops this whole mathematics around it, and that there are some infinities that are bigger than other infinities. One could imagine if you're really obsessed with this, and then you could maybe imagine going down that line of like, maybe it gets to be overwhelming. Maybe you have Maybe you need a break, a vacation, a drill.
Yeah, we don't know what his actual
Have
symptoms
no
were.
idea what. Yeah.
Right. So, and I would say that's a cultural basis, because if you just grabbed someone from today
Yeah.
and had them, and I've done this, I've gone down the road of trying to understand infinity mathematics, and it's not comfortable, because it's hard to understand. It's uncomfortable to have that kind of math, because it's like, but it's infinity. But then when they walk through it, you're like, oh, okay. So there's that. And so if the cultural basis was that, well, you actually are seeing God, or you're getting close to God, or you're not supposed to know this, or it's the unknown, right? You're the first person heading into this mind space.
Especially at a time where people were still getting accused of witchcraft pretty easily over stuff.
Right. And you'd be like, well, maybe there is.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if this is true, but I seem to remember hearing that the Catholic Church or the Spaniards believed that there were certain octaves on the piano that were of the devil, and you could never, like a diminished fifth,
the
or
tritone, the augmented fourth, diminished fifth. That was. It's called the devil's interval.
Right.
And you, in a church, for example, you weren't supposed to play that.
Right. I'll play it right now.
Yeah.
Right.
The basis of rock and roll, but that interval was considered too dissonant to be holy.
Right. And thus, I don't know if it was explicit or not, but if you played it, it could invite the devil or a demon or something. And you could see how someone might be very distressed and might end up in a, in a whatever version of insane asylum they'd have back then. But I don't know. I think it's a little silly and romantic, and I think it just plays into this notion that mental illness is this cartoonish, simple thing, and it's always associated with genius. And
I will say that,
or if you're going to be a genius, it will drive you crazy.
Oh, right. You can't be a genius
because, think of all the other mathematicians that didn't develop those kind of symptoms.
It also might be a little bit of okay, it's okay that I'm not a genius, because if I were, I would go crazy, so it's fine. It's like, it's better that I'm not that smart.
Right. Yeah.
But I will say, speaking of the thing about uncomfortableness around infinity, I actually had this really weird thing happen a couple of years ago. I was with friends, and I had recently been reading some stuff. I go through loops while I'll revisit some math stuff, and I was telling him about the concept of, you've probably heard the hotel mind experiment, where you have an infinity hotel.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have an infinite number of people arrive in a bus, and it's no problem. The person at the front desk says, oh yeah, no problem, we have infinite rooms, so you go in room 1, you go in room 2, and so forth, and you'll all accommodate. And then a second bus arrives with another infinite people, and like, what do you do? And before Cantor, before those things, have been like, well, you can't, the hotel's full. Then it's like, well, actually, what if you tell the first person in line that arrived, you say, hey, you go to the first room, and you tell that person to move to the next even room, and then you take their room, and then you do that. So everyone who's currently in a room is all going to end up in the even rooms, and the new people are going to end up in the odd rooms. Well, that's not possible. It is, because there's infinite of both of them. But I was telling this to my friends, and they became kind of enraged about the conversation.
Yeah, it's because that. I know enough about mathematics and math theory to know that it's you have to understand the landscape and the reasons why they would even explore infinity.
Right.
Because there are some legitimate mathematical situations where it helps to have a tool, a way to solve for infinity and these kinds of problems. You can literally have some Einstein, chalkboard equation that has you adding infinity to infinity. And how do you do that, right? And so you have to have these tools or ways of thinking, but it's not literal, because infinity is literally impossible. It's possible in the mathematics sense, but
we don't have any
set.
basis. We don't have any physical thing to latch onto.
You can't have a set of infinity and see how it behaves.
Right. And it was very interesting because we had to basically stop the conversation because
this is it's a much more complicated version of something that I loathe online, where someone will post a algebraic equation, and it'll be like, there'll be some parentheses, or there won't be parentheses actually. They'll just be like, 1 + 5 times times 3 divided by 7.
Sure.
And for people who don't understand the order of operations, they go 1 + 5 is 6. You times that by 3. That's 18 divided by 7 is whatever. And then everyone, you're a fucking idiot. Education, just what's going on with our country? And I just want to say, like, it's just a simple matter of them either having never been taught, or they don't,
or they just forgot.
Because I don't remember the order of operations.
Because you use it every day.
Because the order of operations is not critical to the ongoing. Unless you're using communication, like I'm trying to communicate. Plus, most people will use parentheses to make sure people follow the order of operations you're hoping that they will.
Yeah.
You don't in Excel type in algebraic equation and expect it to follow the order of operations. You limit it. You bootstrap it with parentheses. And so this is what you're doing to your friend was a version of that, because he's operating without the understanding of where that's coming from, and he's right.
Well, but to be clear, I wasn't like, oh, you're so dumb for not getting this. I was just kind of anecdotally telling the story.
But it was not met helping. You're not
anger.
You're not helping, because it is. I've had that feeling before too.
Yeah.
I've had that feeling when people start talking as if, because like in string theory, there's this proof, if you will, meaning that when you look at all the data and you add up the math, we live in a 14-dimensional universe or something like that. I can't remember how many dimensions, but it's several. And when people talk about it as if it's a fact and they just start yammering on, you're like, well, wait, how do you know that? And they're like, well, it's obvious. I mean, because, if you know about quantum physics and string theory and da-da-da, and it's like, but how do you know string theory is actually how reality operates? Well, because you got observations from the collider and other, but it's still in its infancy regarding the science, and it's possible we'll never be able to get our hands around it to actually study it in the scientific method sort of way. It might kind of be like, well, it's possible it operates this way, and sometimes the math actually pans out. A lot of Einstein's math, he had little to no observation from physics to say, well, that math is true, like with time dilation stuff, that ended up mathematically being what he found, and it was based on a lot of observations, but then it actually panned out. So, the point is that I don't appreciate when people like you, and frankly, people like me, play around with that sort of stuff and aggravate people and act like they're the idiots. I mean, they're rational too, they're just not in the same sort of area that we are when we're yammering about that stupid shit.
I guess so. They're still rational idiots.
So another movie, let's just rattle through these, is The Stanford Prison Experiment. 2013. Did you see this movie?
Yeah.
Billy Crudup, Ezra Miller. Is it accurate? Yeah, from my memory. And Philip Zimbardo, so it's a biography movie, biographical movie, a biopic, or what some people will erroneously say, biopic.
A biopic.
Philip Zimbardo, American psychologist, I think he's still with us, I'm not sure. He wanted to prove that us Americans, so in related to the neo-Nazi stuff, I was going to go into this, but we ran out of time, that you had Zimbardo, you had Milgram, and you had Ash. We went into the Ash study about conformity and peer pressure, and Milgram went into the phenomenon of following orders, even though you might be literally killing somebody. With Zimbardo, he wanted to look at how people, not only Nazis, but how an oppressive group with power, how they might actually run away with that power, even though they're not psychopathic, they're just regular people. And so he took a bunch of volunteers and at Stanford and was going to pay them a fair amount of money and said, okay, just randomly assigned, okay, you 10 people are going to be prisoners and you 10 people are going to be guards.
Right.
And the conclusion was, because by the end of the experiment, the guards who started off as just like, the same as the prisoners, by the end of the experiment, supposedly the guards are being very sadistic and harmful to the prisoners. The prisoners have been completely broken down psychologically. But what was not reported by Zimbardo himself and colleagues was that Zimbardo was manipulating the guards to be worse. He didn't just let them do whatever. There was a lot of subtle and not so subtle messages from Zimbardo. And again, Zimbardo's paying these people money. So if you're a guard, you're like,
right.
But he's the boss.
Which is too bad, because that could have still been all part of the documented experiment, which is how little, because, he wasn't paying them millions, how little influence from an authority figure plus maybe some incentive would it take for otherwise normal people to become past certain boundaries? That's still interesting.
Yeah.
Why not disclose the whole enchilada?
Yeah. When you're, you only get so much time and money to do research like this, and you really, and it worked. He became one of the most famous psychologists of all time, basically on a lie. That happens a lot. Milgram had kind of a similar thing, although to a lesser extent. Now, are the findings interesting psychologically? Yeah, I suppose. Milgram more so than Zimbardo. But now we don't need to look very far in life and in research to find this phenomenon. It's unethical to do what Zimbardo did. Like you could never do a study like that today. It's too risky and literally harmful to people. I mean, at some point, the guards put one of the prisoners in like a 3-foot cube box, a locked box.
Yeeks.
For I don't even know how long. So,
oh my God.
That's from my memory. I could be wrong about that detail, but the cruelty was up there. And Zimbardo and a lot of other people were watching the news feed, and this is all from memory as well. And the other researchers were I think they were grad students, and they're under Zimbardo's authority, so they don't have a lot of power. And I think one of his colleagues actually comes over just to check it out one night, and is looking at what's happening, and he turns to Zimbardo and is like, you got to shut this down. This is not okay. Zimbardo doesn't do it. I think what ended up happening is Zimbardo's girlfriend or wife actually came by to visit and saw it, and she was like, no, this is evil. You have to shut this down. And then that's when he finally, because someone could have been killed,
of course, and I'm sure someone was traumatized.
Yeah. Now they've done documentaries and interviewed a lot of the folks, and at least things seem to be okay, but who knows? But one example that I can point to that I saw was this documentary / reality TV show. I think it was in Britain, where they took a bunch of kids and they, have you seen this?
It sounds familiar.
They gave them a house, like maybe there were 12-ish, and maybe like 15 boys, and they gave them a house, and they said, here's the food, and you have food enough for a month. You have to ration it out.
It's Lord of the Flies.
Yeah, and there's no rules, but figure it out. And so, of course, a lot of bad things start to happen. And
I haven't seen it, but I heard of this. That sounds like a recipe for a disaster.
Yeah, but it's not like a proper experiment, because they know they're being filmed.
Yeah,
and they know that if they wanted to pull the plug, they can.
Right.
And I don't even think they're being paid. But even within that format, there was this one moment that I think was pretty telling. You have this is all from my memory. You had this moment where I think 9 kids were left for some reason, and there were 2 bedrooms. And of course the bedrooms were completely trashed, and there was all this spray paint all over the walls and everything. But, at nighttime you got to go to sleep. And so in one room you had 5 boys, in the other room you had 4 boys. And in the footage you can see the boys are, because there's already been some fighting and some resource problems of like, hey, that's mine, that kind of stuff. And the room with the 4 boys are like, well, we're 4 boys and they're 5 boys. And also I think the 4 boys were a little nicer, not willing to get aggressive. And the 4 boys started to get really worried, right? And then the 5 boys start thinking like, those 4 boys, they're going to start getting worried, and they might take things into their own hands. So because they're paranoid, so it starts to look kind of like Russia and NATO, where if everyone just decided to not be paranoid, then there would be nothing to be paranoid about.
Right. And
so things start to escalate, and then the group of the 5 boys start invading and bullying and attacking and stuff. And so, I think that even though they know they're being filmed and it does seem to reflect how people actually act. All right, I'm going to rattle through the rest of this. Analyze This, 1999, Robert De Niro.
Oh, with Robert De Niro.
That was Billy Crystal.
Wait, that was 99?
Yeah.
That came out at the same time as The Sopranos. That's bizarre.
Yeah, that is interesting, because I always thought Sopranos was later. Yeah. Because it's so similar to Analyze. So it must have been, like one of the, like, what was those, what were 2 movies?
Yeah, the disaster movies, Armageddon and Deep Impact.
Deep Impact, yeah. So does it depict panic disorder or PTSD? No. Because again, it's just a comedy movie. Yeah. But there's a moment at the end where Robert De Niro is going to shoot Billy Crystal, essentially. And Billy Crystal, the therapist, empathizes and gets Robert De Niro, the mob boss, to cry about an event that happened to him when he was young. And he cries, and he's cured. So now, did he have PTSD? Did he have panic? I don't know. Or was it just like some regular sort of grief reactivity?
I don't remember. Does he get out of the mob? Or is he just cured as in
well, they had a sequel, Analyze That.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think he gets out of the mob.
Okay.
The 3 Faces of Eve, 1957, which is about dissociative identity disorder. And I don't think I've ever seen that movie, which is weird because you'd think I would, but I...
Let me ask you, is Medusa, the touch of the Medusa, is that what it's called? You know which movie I'm talking about?
No.
With married to so Michael Jackson looked up to Elizabeth Taylor, and this was Richard Burton. Richard Burton. He was in a coma, but he had these telekinetic capabilities.
Oh.
And
how can you use him if he's in a coma?
Because that's the problem. He's and they show flashbacks and stuff, but while he's in the coma, he is able to do stuff, and he's getting more powerful or something. I don't know. I saw it when I was a kid, but it was really good. Why is it psychological? Because the whole thing, like, I remember there were a lot of scenes about, I think he was either he was a therapist or he was, no, there was some therapist involved. But it was a really intense movie because, like, how many movies about telekinesis are there? It's not that many.
Every Star Wars movie.
No, that's not telekinesis. That's the Force.
The Talented Mr. Ripley, again, 1999.
Oh, I love that movie.
Yeah, isn't it 1999 is that year that people will point to and say, how are so many awesome movies come out in 1999? The Matrix, right? And
I think was it American Psycho?
Analyze This.
Yeah. American Psycho was 99, I think.
Yeah. Talented Miss Ripley, I give 10 out of 10. I love that movie for a variety of reasons.
So good.
They never diagnose Mr. Ripley, Matt Damon's character, but it is a very accurate presentation of, it's hard to know. I've done deep dives, or I've talked about this on previous episodes a long time ago, and I think I might have said borderline, but he also could be characterized as narcissistic and definitely has psychopathic tendencies as, con artist, or all three. But
he plays such a dimensional character, and
right. And his motivation is he's insecure. That's what's kind of nice about this movie, is that it's not like Hannibal Lecter.
Right.
It's someone that if things go well for him, he doesn't want to harm anybody.
Right.
But when things are starting to go bad, he has very destructive impulses.
Yeah.
And you get the sense that he's very destructive, not because he's like, well, now it's time to kill everybody. It's that he's so desperate for connection and for acceptance and to be seen as someone special in upper class, And so I very much appreciate Talon Miss Ripley and There Will Be Blood, because you see how from the outside a personality disorder is very problematic, very harmful, very annoying.
Yeah.
But when you kind of get into the interior, especially of the Talon Mr. Ripley, you're like, oh, I can see where it's coming from. It's not that he wakes up in the morning and says, I want to kill Philip Seymour Hoffman and Jude Law. He just wants to be loved and accepted.
Did we discuss this when we were talking about Anna Delphi?
I don't remember.
Isn't that her name, Anna Delphi?
Yep.
Yeah, because it was obviously she was not, at least not accused of being a murderer or anything, but that sense of like wanting to belong in the scene and being, and I remember when I was watching that movie, feeling his desperation along those lines of like, I really want to be part of this.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't think I ever made that connection. Anna Delphi is like the talented Mr. Delphi.
Yeah.
Manhattan Murder Mystery, 1993, Woody Allen.
Oh, I never seen this.
I must have seen it, but I don't remember it at all. Antwone Fisher, 2002. Apparently it's about child abuse, child sexual abuse. I feel like I've seen it, but I don't remember it. The Snake Pit, 1948. No idea. Supposed to be about schizophrenia. And the last movie that ChatGPT pumps out is Equus, 1997.
Right, where he's obsessed to... this one's also with Richard Burton?
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
He's a psychiatrist.
And he's like he has obsession with horses, right?
The patient.
The patient is obsessed with horses in a sexual way, right?
Yeah, it's also a play.
Yeah.
Like
in fact, Daniel
Radcliffe, yeah. And a lot of other really famous actors have done the stage play. And I did a whole episode on Equus years and years ago. It was one of the first kind of deep dives I did. And from my memory, one, I gave it a 3 out of 10. As a movie, it's not very entertaining to me. It's, I don't know, just kind
I remember thinking I liked it, but being quite confused. I don't think I understood a lot of it.
Yeah, well, it has a lot of old school Freudian notions, which I will say are applied well. They're not like magical or something or unrealistic. Basically, you have this guy who is raised in a very oppressive family, parents, and you could argue that society is pretty oppressive too. Yeah. And he is emerging into adulthood, and he has a lot of conflicting urges, and he has a lot of shame about his sexuality. He, really wants to be with this girl. He is impotent. He's obsessed with horses. He obviously is very stressed out. He has been given these weird messages from his parents, a lot of religion, and he has this break where he starts to feel ashamed. I think the idea is he starts to feel very ashamed of himself and hates himself, but also feels oppressed, and it always comes back to this horse. And he starts to think of the horse as like a god, or that it knows him, and he there's all these horses in this stable, and I think it's his house, I'm not sure. And he the end of the movie, the reason why he ended up in psychiatry with Richard Burton is this one night, which is revealed I think later in the movie, he takes some sort of spike and gouges out all the eyes of the horses because he believes the horses are seeing into his soul and judging him or something. And there's also like all the sexuality, like he likes to ride horses when he's naked, and a lot of.
What year did this come out?
77, the movie.
Yeah, right. No, but I didn't see it back then. I saw it like I must have seen it on TV or something, or VHS, and I remember being very,
Yeah, I'm guessing you didn't see it at the age of 2.
I remember being very uncomfortable with some of the theme, like, you know, like I remember like he's riding the horse. I remember being like, well, this is weird.
Yeah. Now, could this happen? Yeah. It's not. It's pretty fantastical, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. You know, could you have, especially back then in that culture, a young man who is that oppressed and that traumatized and pulled in all different directions, and that confused, without any support, without any way out, and he's he's socially awkward. He's trying to get together with this girl he's obsessed with, and I think when he tries to get together with her, they're in the stable, and he's impotent because he's scared, he's awkward, but he equates that with the shame
horses.
of God, and the horses are looking at me, and he has this poster of a horse above his bed, and his mom's always talking about God, and his dad's always talking about rationality,
right?
And he has nowhere to turn, and then one day he's just like, he's angry and he sees these horses and he's just like, no, you're not going to look at me, and just attacks the horses and, gouges out all their eyes. It's a weird story, but, it could happen.
But it could be like you could see it as a manifestation that nowadays we might see as someone grabbing a gun and going and shooting a bunch of people.
Right. And there's also like themes of homosexuality, like from my memory, this strapping man on a beach, like picks him up. He's like a kid, and says, would you like to ride a horse with me? And he's like, okay. And then he rides behind him on the horse, and he's very, and it also has to do with like freedom and breaking free of your parents. It's pretty, and there's a reason why it keeps being a successful play on Broadway and whatnot, because it is very rich with themes, and it all kind of comes together, and it's also very evocative because there's something primordial about horses and humans. And I don't want to say sexual, but physical, right? Because you ride the horse,
you break the horse, you ride the horse.
It's between your legs, and it's powerful, and it's strong, and it can save you, and it can kill you, and they're gentle creatures, but they can be, violent or at least powerful, and I think it interweaves Freudian. As I'm talking about it, I'm liking it more and more. It interweaves like good parts of, I don't know if it's exactly Freudian, but at least the kind of the dogma in psychiatry at the time, and about unearthing things, and it's not cheesy in that way, because you could have someone help, Richard Burton kind of character, help the patient unearth that and feel okay to speak it and to get support around it, and have that actually be transformational for them, and still be within the dogma of psychiatry at the time. So, I mean, that's all from memory, but,
So 2 notable misses for me. The biggest one, of course, Inside Out.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, doesn't get more psychological than that.
Yeah,
but also it depends on what psychology means, because a lot of times when you say a psychological movie, it's dark and it's a thriller, and it's...
Well, and then to that point, where's American freaking Psycho?
Yeah.
But also, I recently rewatched Vanilla Sky, and...
Another psychology movie.
Another psycho, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I only said 10, but it's interesting, like, what ChatGPT chose, because The Snake Pit from 1948, I have a hard time believing that many listicles include that movie.
Sure. Although, actually, though, but you know how a lot of lists are like, best movie of all time is Casablanca. Like, there'll be sort of a glorification of older movies.
Yeah, but The Snake Pit... I don't hear anyone talking about that movie as like, and maybe it is, but and also like Antwone Fisher.
Are you sure they didn't mean snakes on a plane?
I have bookmarked a video on YouTube in which an expert on snakes breaks down snake depiction in movies.
Okay.
And of course, they're going to get into snakes on a plane.
And anaconda, I hope.
Yeah. And so I love these. I don't even know what YouTube channel it's on. It's one of the big ones. And they always have experts who will break down
the specific
like I watched a really long video yesterday of World War II experts breaking down World War II movies.
Okay.
It's interesting to see.
So one channel I love is Tasting History. I think that's...
Oh, yeah, I like that guy.
Oh, my gosh. The guy's so entertaining. And
I know, he's a very charming
I always get
dude.
very hungry when he was... But also
depending on what he's making.
I'm generally into whatever it is, even the weirder stuff.
Because some of the stuff from history is, you're just like, what?
I still like him, man, just because I want to... But then he'll go into the history of it. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Like
sometimes it's a little long-winded, but I like the channel because sometimes I just want to get to the actual, I just want to get to the recipe because I just want to see what it might have looked like. You know, what did the ancient Greeks eat?
The other day he was making these figs stuffed with nuts and honey.
Oh yeah, I saw that one.
Oh my gosh, I
would not have thought that would be a channel that you would like.
I love food stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
I mean, I watch a lot less of it nowadays.
Yeah.
But there was a while where I would watch maybe half of my content was food related.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I am a terrible cook. I never cook. I don't prepare any food. I eat out all the time. I order Grubhub all the time. Stacy's not really a cook either. So we just don't really have that kind of thing in that life. And yet I know exactly how to make a baguette.
Because you've seen the...
I know how to get the starter going.
Yeah.
I know what the technique is because it's a very delicate process. There's other things that I know how to make too, like beef bourguignon or whatever. I don't even know how to pronounce it. Because I watch this one guy, what's his name? He's really great. He will try to make Julia Child's recipes from the book without watching the video.
Okay.
He just follows the instruction. And, it's French cooking, so
Sure.
it's like pretty complicated. And he also has gotten better over the years because he started,
Sure.
But God, what's his name? The Anti-Chef. That's what it's called. And so I've seen all these videos and like, why am I watching this stuff?
Yeah. So you can't put it to use, but you know it.
But what is that? What's the psychology?
I'm similar, although I have cooked a lot more in the last few years. But, well, for example, part of it is I do love going to a restaurant and eating a fancy meal, right?
Yeah.
So kind of learning about how those things are made is interesting because usually it's just more like, this looks great, tastes great. And then the other aspect for me that like sometimes I'll watch... there's videos where they try to remake something, but they don't have the recipes exactly. For example, try to match Dr. Pepper's taste, and like they go through and they talk about all the possible ingredients.
That seems more interesting because it's more of a science adventure.
Yeah.
But like, why would you and you don't watch them so much anymore? Watch just someone make something.
Well, but like as a family, we watch the Great British Baking Show.
Well, that's different though because it's a contest, and they're like, I'm just boggled as to why I would watch so much of Babish and Anti-Chef.
I don't have a good answer because like I also liked Man versus Food, and you'd say, oh well, that's about but actually the part that I liked the least about it was the binging. I was always actually like, don't eat so much, like you're gonna die, like don't do it. But I really liked when he would talk about the food and how they make it, and then the cook would come out and be like, we'll use these kind of onions, and it's just fascinating.
Yeah, it's sort of like watching, I guess it scratches a similar itch with channels that I watch where they'll make like a cabin in the woods. It's just it's a procedure. It's
right.
Like you're like, that's how you make that.
Did you see those where they make a whole like luxury living space out of mud? Where they like dig into the ground.
Well, so do you know the kind of problem?
No, is that
there are some of those channels that are legit.
Okay.
Where I think it's Filipino guys. These two Filipino guys that I would watch a lot.
They dig into the mud,
and they don't even use tools. They have just a branch, and they're just chipping away at hard earth and just slowly but surely creating basically like a Tatooine underground
with
whole
flowing waterfalls with the whole thing.
A pool and rooms and a little fireplace and I think when those started to get popular and get millions of views and thus make millions of dollars, you had a lot of scammers that would come in and make it look like they were doing that, but they would have like backhoes and a whole crew. Because of course, right? Like if you can make a video in 4 hours and
take 7 days
and make $1 million, but you just have to shoot, film a couple guys occasionally putting in some labor. So
everything is ruined.
Yeah, it ruined it for me too because I used to watch a lot of those too. I think the one that I watched, it was like, well, you can see them doing most of the labor. So if they do have some help, I guess fine. But we're watching a time lapse of them chip away at that, dirt wall for, so they don't cut away and then all of a sudden half of the work is done. So even if they are getting help, it's still amazing.
The other ones that are, oh my gosh, they're making me so hungry. Watching there's these grandmas like that. There's a few that got kind of famous. Like, and it's like grandma's cooking her chicken thing, and it's these big pots, and she's making the whole village.
There's another guy. He's in Texas, I think, and he's this country western kind of guy, and he has this really funny way of talking, and he cooks outside all the time, and he has this really kind of funny way of his little interstitials, but yeah, those people I'll watch. I guess I haven't been watching those so much recently either, but yeah. So that's us talking about that. Tune in next time in the next episode when we talk about. I asked ChatGPT to give the top movies of Hispanic Americans.
Oh, inclusivity.
And then Asian Americans.
Right.
And then female Americans.
Nice.
And then white male Americans.
Okay.
And comparing those lists because it's another example.
Eye-opening.
It's another example of just how lopsided representation is. Spoiler alert. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.